Amen. Praise the Lord. I'll just begin at a point where Shelley ended yesterday. If you all remember what Shelley shared about. Most of you will remember because most of you love pork. Because Shelley made a very clear demonstration of you need to be a pig, not a chicken. You need to lay it all down when it comes to God. And as we concluded that service yesterday, I made some comments, and one of the comments I made was that God can use anyone. And I also mentioned that God uses ordinary people. The people God uses are not extraordinary. They are not your hard to find material. They are not your unique, all with extras type of people. They are in fact, they are so ordinary that sometimes you will even step back and say, is that really? Don't I know this guy? So there is that sense. They are the fishermen. They are the tax collectors. They are the guys who are the misfits. God loves to use such people. God will use anyone. And I thought it was just an appropriate sermon. But the one person God will not use is the one that is not committed. So commitment is a very, very critical thing for us. And it's important for us to follow that. But today, and indeed this week, I would like us to begin to explore something almost in line of that. And I would like us to get into Deuteronomy chapter 7. And I'll be reading from verse 1. Let me give you a moment for you to get into that chapter. And I'll be reading from verse 1. We're going to read the entire chapter, and then I'll make some comments today. Not to worry, we have the whole week. We have Wednesday, we have Friday. So we are not going to be in a hurry. Deuteronomy 7, 1. Deuteronomy 7, verse 1. Okay. This is what it says in my Bible. I'm reading from King James Version. When the Lord your God shall bring you into the land where you go to, let me read again. Wherever you have that capital Lord, it is the name Yahweh. So I'm just going to pronounce the name wherever it is. When Yahweh your God shall bring you into the land whether you go to possess it, and has cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. And when Yahweh your God shall deliver them before thee, you shall smite them and utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them, nor show mercy to them. Neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter thou shalt not give to his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take to thy son. For they will turn away thy son from following me, that they may serve other gods. So will the anger of Yahweh be kindled against you, and destroy thee suddenly. But thus shall ye deal with them. Ye shall destroy their altars, and break down their images, and cut down their groves, and burn their graven images with fire. For thou art a holy people unto Yahweh your God. Yahweh your God has chosen you to be a special people unto himself, because all people that are above all people that are upon the face of the earth. And Yahweh did not set his love upon you, nor choose you, because you were more in number than any people, for you were fewest of all the people. But because Yahweh loved you And because he would keep the oath which he swore unto your fathers, has Yahweh brought you out with a mighty hand, and redeemed you out of the house of bondmen, from the house of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore that Yahweh your God, he is God, the faithful God, which keeps covenant and mercy with them that love him, and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations, and repays them that hate him to their face, to destroy them. He will not be slack to him that hates him, he will repay him to his face. You shall therefore keep the commandments and the statutes and the judgments which I command thee this day, to do them. Wherefore it shall come to pass, if ye hearken to these judgments and keep and do them, that Yahweh your God shall keep unto thee the covenant and the mercy which he sware unto your fathers. Verse 13. And he will love thee and bless thee and multiply thee, and he will bless the fruit of thy womb and the fruit of thy land, thy corn and thy wine, thine oil, the increase of thine kind, and the flocks of thy sheep in the land which he sware unto thy fathers to give them. Thou shalt be blessed above all people. There shall not be male or female barren among you or among your cattle. And Yahweh will take away from thee all sicknesses, and will put none of the evil diseases of Egypt, which you know, upon thee, but will lay them upon all them that hate thee. And thou shalt consume all the people which Yahweh your God shall deliver thee. Thine eye shall have no pity upon them, neither shalt thou serve their gods, for that will be a snare unto thee. Verse 17. If thou shalt say in thy heart, these nations are more than I, how can I dispossess them? Thou shalt not be afraid of them, but shall well remember what Yahweh your God did unto Pharaoh and unto all Egypt, the temptations which thine eyes saw, and the signs and the wonders and the mighty hand and the stretched out arm, whereby Yahweh your God brought thee out. So shall the Lord Yahweh your God do unto all the people of whom thou art afraid. Verse 20. Moreover, Yahweh your God will send the hornet among them until they are left and hide themselves from thee and be destroyed. Thou shalt not be affrighted at them, for Yahweh your God is among you, a mighty God and terrible. And Yahweh your God will put out those nations before thee by little and little. Thou may not consume them at once, lest the beasts of the field increase upon thee. But Yahweh your God shall deliver them unto thee, and shall destroy them with a mighty destruction until they be destroyed. And he shall deliver their kings into thine hand, and thou shalt destroy their name from under heaven, and there shall no man be able to stand before thee until thou hast destroyed them. Verse 25, the graven images of their gods you shall burn with fire. You shall not desire the silver or gold that is on them, nor take it unto thee, lest thou be snared therein. For it is an abomination unto Yahweh your God. Neither shalt thou bring an abomination into your house, lest thou be a cast thing like it. But thou shalt utterly detest it, and thou shalt utterly abhor it, for it is a cast thing. Okay, we've read the entire chapter 7, but I want to kind of walk through this chapter and begin to speak to certain things. As I was reading through this, we went through a verse that I one time preached about a couple of weeks ago. And that verse speaks about signs and wonders. Many times in Barokole Church, when we talk about signs and wonders, we think about miracles, angels appearing, and virgin birth. Those are the things that come into our mind. But the first occurrence of this word, signs and wonders, was a demonstration of the power of our God, Yahweh, against our enemies. That was the first time. In verse 19, he says, and this is in reference to Egypt and how God delivers Israel from Egypt. Remember, in Egypt, Israel never had rights. They were the underdogs. They were the slaves. And even the what do they call it? The blood upon them had been increased by Pharaoh and his handmen. And so Israel never had any form of technical know-how. They were at a disadvantaged point. They really had no starting point. And that's the whole point about our God, that when he has called you by name, it doesn't matter who you know or who you don't know. What matters is your relationship with him. Over the last 6 months, we have made an emphasis, but what has become very, very clear to me personally in both the fellowship and in my Bible reading, as we have been told to read through the Bible this year, it has become apparent to me that God has washed out the old images of himself from my head, literally. As I've gone through the Bible again, I am seeing a total fresh image of who he is. And I'm beginning to understand when Paul writes and says that sometimes we see as though dimly through a glass. These matters of God, sometimes what you think you know today was a fuzzy image of the real thing. So as we continue, coming back to this point, that the children of Israel in Egypt, if it were to be weighed against the measures of man, they had no business being at the side of victory at all. And in verse 18, it says, it begins in verse 17. And after he has been speaking a lot of things, it comes to verse 17 when he says, if you shall say in your heart, these nations are more than I, how can I dispossess them? I want you to think about the language used there. The God that we serve, the time that we are in is a time of dispossession. When you dispossess somebody, it means you are taking someone's property. And I'll tell you that the natural reaction of man when their own property is being taken away is to fight back. So God is telling Israel that I have instructed you to take it. And Israel is thinking in their mind, my God, with all these downsides and disadvantages to us, how are we going to dispossess them? And God answers, he says, no, you shall not be afraid of them. But you shall remember what Yahweh your God did to Pharaoh and unto all Egypt. God is telling them that when you have doubts about what I am about to do, there is one thing for you, go back and begin to see what I did to Egypt. And he says in verse 9, the great temptations which your eyes saw, and the signs and the wonders and the mighty hand of God and the stretched out arm whereby Yahweh your God brought you out. Signs and wonders are about the power of God, child of God. We do not serve a God who is static. Our God lives. Our God is the giver of life. Our God speaks. Our God provides direction. Our God protects. He is not a piece of timber or a physical thing. In fact, when you read the Bible and you go back in the past, even when God gave Moses instructions of how to build the temple, countless times in that same Old Testament, he continued to tell Israel that, do you think you can build for me a house? He kept asking them that rhetoric question. So really the issue is, our God is power. He is life itself. When he descends, life descends. When he comes down, things that were dead become alive. I have been reading through the book of Ezekiel, but it is interesting. After the many chapters, God gets to that point and he's asking Ezekiel, son of man, tell me, can these bones come alive? You know, you think God didn't know the answer? Of course, he wanted to address the doubts in Ezekiel's life. And that's exactly what I'm speaking to today. That when we look at the things that God has promised us as a congregation, as a people in a nation, as concerning Africa, as concerning the role of Uganda, as concerning the role of Kawempe Worship Center, it seems as though, how are we able to overtake them? How are we able to dispossess them? How are we able to do these things? And he's saying he's the God of signs and wonders. There is a new perspective with which you need to begin seeing God. And I want to go back now to verse 1. And in verse 1, it says, when Yahweh your God shall bring you into the land where you're going to possess it. Now, he's talking to a people who haven't yet possessed the land, and he's telling them, you're going to go and possess it. But he's telling them that when you get into that place by the grace and the power of God, when you get into that marriage by the grace and the power of God, when you get into that business expansion by the grace and the power of God, when you get into that political office by the grace and the power of God, when you get into that promise that has been made to you by the grace and the power of God, when you get into that house that suddenly you realize you own a property by the grace and the power of God. This is what he is saying. When you get to that place to possess it, and have cast out many nations before thee, he begins listing 7 nations. And this is what he says, and the gist of what I want to emphasize today. He mentions, he breaks the nations down by name up to the 7th nation, which is the Jebusites. And he says, these are 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. The nations are greater and mightier than thou. Child of God, Yahweh our God, Hebrews tells us that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. If yesterday he fed Israel, his chosen nation, nations, 7 of them greater and mightier than they were, he will still do it today. The things that God speaks to us, let me put it this way. What makes him God is that he is able to do the impossible. He is able to serve nations, 7 nations, greater and mightier than you are. So the people or the giants in front of you that you're about to consume, they are not your level at all. They are beyond your punching power. You have no business even standing in front of one of them. But you know what? When Yahweh has put a commission upon you, he serves you nations, 7 nations, greater and mightier than you. And in verse 2, and when Yahweh your God shall deliver them before you, and you shall smite them and utterly destroy them, you shall make no covenant with them, nor show my mercy to them. The point, child of God, that I want to make today is that the kind of challenges that are ahead of us are greater and mightier than all your capacity compounded that you can handle. The other day, Pastor Robert and I and Engineer Kavuma took around a couple of engineers on our church property to survey and to plan. But the things we are planning are greater and mightier than us. But what I'm saying is that we are going to see them come to pass. Today I posted something on our WhatsApp group. For a while, I have wanted to reach out to some of my friends concerning the gym, but suddenly today I felt that it was time to reach out. So I compiled something and I sent it out. But I'll tell you that the responses that I have so far received was nothing like I expected. You know, it seemed as though this gym thing was impossible. Why are we doing the gym? It is one of the things that God is speaking to us very strongly as pastors. If you go speak to Pastor Robert, Pastor Magay, I mean, you will get to understand that there is a shift in which God is working, and he is doing things in a way different than any of us know. Some of the things and some of the harvest is going to come to us in ways that are greater and mightier than we are. And that's where you can eventually say it is not by power, not by might, but by the Spirit of the Lord. A lot of these statements for us in the church today have been cliche. You just repeat them because on the pulpit here they say it, on the other hand they say it, in exploits they say it, on the radio they say it, but they are not reality to you. But I want to encourage you, child of God, do not fear the giants. Do not fear the giants, because Paul writes and says that greater is he that is in you than the devil that's in the world. So do not fear the giants, because if God is going to partner with you, he is going to take you into battles with nations, 7 nations that are greater and mightier than you, to the extent that if God is separated from you, you will be crushed and consumed without mercy. So I want us to begin changing our mindset of faith, to begin seeing that perspective of God, and to begin seeing challenges and not fearing the challenges. I am not saying that we go into presumption and begin attacking every giant that's around. Has God asked you to go for that giant? That's the only measure you need. And if God has given you that grace, we shall see it that indeed the Lord sent you, because we will see the nations go down greater and mightier than you, but at your behest, they will go down. I would like us to change our faith, move our faith away from the small, puny, little things that we have been, believing. I'm not saying there is anything wrong with giving testimony over small things, but clearly when God is in the equation, he gives you nations greater and mightier than you, that when you arrive on the other end, people will surely say, hey, you know what? Akana kali tekasola na yowa ekali na katonda. That should be the testimony. You know what? This young girl had no business being around this, but you know what? She surely has a God. 7 nations greater and mightier than you. Let us put on the mindset of victory and the mindset of princes. You know, a prince, you don't have to remind Prince Junju that he is a prince. If we have any Bambeja anywhere, you don't have to remind them, even in their poorest state, they will know that they are princes and princesses. We need to begin wearing that mindset, that you and God, nations greater and mightier than you, are consumed in front of you. And that makes you fearless. It makes you go out and take out anyone without fear and without losing sleep over it. But then there is one thing that you need to understand, that only becomes true in as long as your relationship with God is tight. I repeat that is only true in as long as your relationship with God is tight. And I'm not going to go into the depth of that, but when you read the verses that follow, he begins to highlight to these people the kind of people that they ought to be, people who do not mingle with, the ways of the world, and people who clearly wear the mindset of princes and of the masters over their former masters, And in verse 7, he says, Yahweh did not set his love upon you or choose you because you were more in number, but because he loved you, So he tells them that they were slaves, but he loved them and chose them, and that helps you to maintain that confidence. Some people think that the power of God is with you because you're a performer of holiness and righteousness. That is not why the power of God is with you. The power of God is with you because he has chosen you, he has loved you, he has set his love upon you. So your only thing that you can do is to love him back. And that is how we take down nations greater and mightier than us. Today, I will stop there with that element of mindset. And on Wednesday and Friday, we will continue to build onto that. Pastor Robert?